This little guy has lied so much about my record.
There we go. The person.
He has lied so much about my record.
And it was 2 hours of personal attacks just like that. Donald Trump dishing it out, but he wasn't the only one.
This little guy, wow. Joining us now, let's talk it over. Nolan Finley is here from the Detroit News. Familiar face for Local 4 fans. Of course, Roger Weber and Cynthia Canty here from Michigan Radio. Let's start. Cynthia, why don't you start us off? Just as we kind of think, well, gosh, it can't get any worse.
It does.
It managed to.
And interestingly, right after Super Tuesday night at Mar-a-Lago, Donald Trump was pretty statesmanlike for Donald Trump and said he was going to turn it down, and it took not even 5 minutes for that train to go off the tracks.
What do you think people will remember about this? What will they be talking about tomorrow?
Well, I, for one, wish that they would follow my suggestion, have a trap door under each candidate, a lever, just if they interrupt the other guy, out you go.
Out you go.
Or maybe that sinkhole could just have
That's
opened
right.
up.
Yeah, we was in the wrong place.
It's entertaining as always, but frightening that people are being asked to make a decision based on this
on
message
zero
of the day.
discourse.
Yeah.
Zero serious discourse.
Well, we heard some
Devin.
really good one-liners.
Devin, Carmen, this will go down, I think, as the first debate in the history of American politics in which a candidate assured the American people that he has an ample package.
Well, in
Who
fact,
hated that? Can we have a show of hands?
This is how the evening started. This was Donald Trump. And you remember the old thing in Roger Rabbit where he just couldn't help but respond to... Donald Trump couldn't help but respond to the comment about his hands. Here's how that went.
Referred to my hands. If they're small, something else must be small. I guarantee you there's no problem. I guarantee it.
The audience loved
Okay,
it.
there you go.
And
exactly.
it feeds that kind of rhetoric?
Well, it's inflaming it. What's interesting is as we saw, Marco Rubio had said, I don't want to go there, but then he does, and he doesn't do it right. He can't outshout and he can't out-insult Donald Trump, and he just misses.
Roger, I wondered aloud earlier this week on Twitter if we were getting to a point, though, where our arguments about Donald Trump were getting rather elitist. Clearly, somebody is voting for him. And I think the base of his supporters are not turned off by that comment.
Well, exactly. They are not turned off by the Mitt Romney attack. They are not turned off by Trump losing his cool and not being presidential. He's still in the driver's seat.
In fact, he got cheers after he made that comment.
And I think the audience really degraded the whole thing, frankly. The shouts, it sounded like an old Jerry Springer show.
Yeah,
there really was. It was a rambunctious time, as I said earlier. But Nolan, I guess the question is, and clearly Fox News came loaded for him tonight, too.
Sure.
A lot of pre-produced graphics and sound bites. But does that just make it clear to everybody that he's the leader in this thing?
Well, of course he is, and I mean the election results Tuesday played that out. But what you saw tonight, I think, was a building or continuation of what went on earlier in the day with Mitt Romney and what's been going on with this Never Trump movement. You now have the leaders of the Republican Party, the donors of the Republican Party, basically the official party, trying to destroy their own frontrunner. And I don't think we've ever seen anything like that, perhaps since 1972 and Democrats and George Wallace, where they were trying to derail his primary surge. And this is incredible to think about.
He certainly had the bullseye on his back tonight, but if you had to come away thinking who won tonight, was there a clear winner tonight?
I would say no. I would hate to cast that vote.
I wouldn't vote for a winner, but anybody looking for an adult, John Kasich was.
He keeps trying to make the point that he's the
And Devin
adult.
said it earlier. You said if anybody was the winner, it was Fox.
I suppose it was Fox News. They had something.
How could you not watch that?
It was hard to turn away from, although some people on Twitter were swearing that they were.
They
It took about an hour and a
did.
half for them to get to where the venue took place, which were questions about Detroit.
Right.
Let's listen to Marco Rubio. He was asked about what's been going on in Flint, and here was his response.
Well, I know I've talked about it, and others in our campaign have talked about it, and other candidates have talked about it as well. What happened in Flint was a terrible thing. It was a systemic breakdown at every level of government, at both the federal and partially at both the state and partially at the federal level as well. And by the way, the politicizing of it, I think, is unfair, because I don't think that someone woke up one morning and said, let's figure out how to poison the water system to hurt someone. But accountability is important. I will say I give the governor credit. He took responsibility for what happened.
Fair question, Cynthia. Has it been politicized, or is this the kind of stuff that makes up American politics? This is an issue that needs a spotlight.
And one person's politicizing is somebody else's advocacy. So it's a very, very gray area, and it's very fluid. And it is keeping the spotlight trained on Flint, which needs to happen no matter what it takes, whether it's Cher sending water bottles or somebody saying it's being politicized.
And then, of course, this weekend in Flint, the Democrats will make hay over this whole thing.
Of course they will.
And so we may be seeing a warm-up to a November campaign. Of course, Republicans have not carried Michigan since, what, 88? Flint will be an important part of that debate.
I think what you saw there, though, in Marco Rubio's answer is his potential. We talked to him yesterday for an ed board, and when he's focused on policy, he is very good, very sharp. I mean, he's a legitimate heavyweight when it comes to talking about policy. But he came out there tonight with one mission, and that was to attack, attack, attack. I mean, he looked like a little terrier at times and sounded that way, and it became almost diminishing for him.
Yes.
You know, it was hard to
But
take
don't you
him
think he was
seriously.
told to do that,
Well,
though?
I think that this, again, is part of this. We've got to stop
his
Trump.
strategy.
And they are now convinced the only way to stop Trump is to tear him down and, you know, to further the talking points that Romney gave
Well, he
today,
had-
rather than the candidates trying to sell themselves.
But he had Marco Rubio on one side, but he also had to deal with Ted Cruz on the other.
Right. And I mean, but which of these candidates, other than John Kasich when he got a chance, which of these candidates was selling himself?
Yeah.
And he brought it back to that.
Roger, you and I have been emailing this week. I've been dying to ask. So, good time to be retired and not in this mess, or are you missing this at all?
I don't
you
know if
wouldn't
I'm
miss
watching this campaign out of civic duty or I'm just fascinated by the slow motion train wreck of the whole thing that's
So
happening.
where
I
do-
can't take my eyes off it.
Where do we go from here?
What
We're gonna
happens
see
Tuesday?
much. Yeah.
What happens Tuesday? I think it's pretty well agreed what's going to happen Tuesday. It's going to be Trump.
You know, there's going to be a lot of money spent over the next few days by these super PACs that are forming, Republican super PACs forming to tear down Trump, and I just don't think it's going to work. There's something going on here with his voters that no matter what he says
He
or what
can do
anybody
no
else
wrong.
says about him, he can do no wrong. Right.
Well, and they asked him to promise not to split off. At
Great
the first debate, they asked Trump, and he said, "I won't split." And now are they trying
And
to
now
come in
they're
and
the ones-
undercut him?
Yes.
Great points.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All
great.
right.
And we'll have to leave it there. Thank you all
We
very
will.
much for
Thank you so
spending
much.
time with us tonight.
And right now, we'll continue our conversation during a live primetime Flashpoint. won't you?
Exactly right. Hope you'll be with us tomorrow night. You'll see it right here at 8 on Local 4.